Welcome, everyone. This is Joy Hall Bryant. We're so pleased to have you join us today. The topic is digitally transform your agency, modernize with intelligent ECM and automated document workflow. We've got experts from Smartbride sharing with us today, and I appreciate it because I don't know just a whole lot about this topic, so I'm excited to learn. A few announcements from me, and then we'll move right into it. There should be an evaluation pop up as you exit. We would really appreciate that feedback. It's pretty minimal. There's only one required question. We'll take any other information you want to give us, but if you could just answer that one, it would be really helpful. We use that not only to improve the programs, but DIR needs it for performance measures and to help justify us sponsoring free programs like this. There will be a CPE form. We're awarding 1 hour of continuing education credit. DIR awards Texas IRM CPEs and will document generic contact hours. A lot of people with various licenses and certifications can use that documentation, but that's up to the governing body as to how you apply it. Also, let me mention that if you didn't hear about this directly and you want future announcements, the easiest way is to join one of our discussion lists. You can go to the DIR main page, scroll to the bottom left corner and look for Stay Connected. That will take you to the collaboration page. All of your IRMs are on a private list, the top IT person at each agency that serves as a communication link to DIR. So they all get this, but you can join, there are several different ones. What I would recommend is DIR Tech. That one is for any public sector government employee interested in IT. There's another for DIR Train, and we send them there, but that's really the training community. It's not so much the audience for a topic like this. It's more that they're good about relaying the information for free training into their organizations. And then there are some smaller lists like accessibility, project management. You might be interested in some of those others. Also, we post these on the calendar from any DIR page. Click calendar, you should be able to see upcoming events. We're kind of getting into a bit of a low zone between Thanksgiving, Christmas, first of the year, but then we'll pick up again in January. DIR is hosting the eRecords conference next week with the Texas Library and Archives Commission. That's an annual conference we've been hosting for over 20 years. Normally it's in Austin, 1 day, 2 tracks, about 350 people. We are offering it virtually and for free. So if you are interested, it's very easy to attend. You don't have to leave your desk, come to one session. We've broken it into 2 half days to make sitting through it a little easier. So just visit the DIR calendar and see details. The eRecords conference is November 18th and 19th. I think if that's it for my announcements, why don't I go ahead and turn it over to Zach. And Zach Reynolds from Smartbride is going to facilitate today, and I'll go ahead and mute.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome for joining our webinar. We really appreciate it. My name is Zach. I'm the marketing coordinator for Smartbride, and today we have Mirage and Mike, and they're going to be walking you guys through our digital transformation webinar on enterprise content management and automated document workflow. So for any questions, we ask you guys to please use the Q&A panel, and we will get those to you in real time, and we will address them in real time. So from here, Mike, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and give the overview on Smartbride?
All right, thanks, Zach. Yeah, so my name is Mike Grosvenor. Let me pull into the deck here. We do have one. Now it's suddenly not driving. There we go. Thank you. So I'll get to the introduction of Smartbride as well as myself and Mirage in just a moment. Quick overview of what we're planning to do today. So we're going to introduce enterprise content management, but more specifically, we want to talk about the more modern implementation, which is intelligent ECM and what that means. We're going to talk about the value in using that to integrate different business processes and functional areas in your organization. We have some slides to talk about technical considerations. You know, we We love to make it sound like it's all, simple and magical, but there is some work, and there are some things that need to happen to enable this. We do have some examples and use cases. And of course, I've got questions here for the end, but like Zach said, anytime along the way, happy to take them as they come. It encourages me to slow down and breathe as I'm going through these. So for the introduction, so that's me. And then the other one is Mirage. You can tell by our names under our pictures. It's a little jarring to see myself pre-pandemic, starting to question whether doing my own haircuts was a good decision. Mirage looks much better. So Mirage and I have worked together for several years at Smartbridge on ECM projects. So I think if you got the flyer on this presentation, it had my bio on it. But I brought him in partly because, like I said, he's got a lot of experience. A lot of the technical issues have fallen to him on some of our projects. So I felt you'd get some firsthand insight, as well as he's one of the hosts of our podcast series. So he's probably a better presenter. So yeah, like and subscribe. About Smartbridge. So we are a Houston-based consulting firm. I'm not going to read everything on this slide. I think everyone gets a copy of this presentation later if they want it. So the one thing I just want to emphasize is that we are intending for this presentation to be vendor neutral, non-commercial. And that's pretty easy for us because we maintain partnerships in different areas, often with competing firms. So we might have 2 ECM vendors or 2 database vendors as official partners. We think that helps us remain more objective. So I'll leave this to you for your later perusal. All right, so the objective of this presentation, I want to kind of get that set up front so people know what we're trying to accomplish. There's a lot of buzzwords in the title and everything else, but we want to really focus on ECM, how intelligent ECM differs, and what that enables you to do in terms of integration for your processes so that you're reducing the manual effort, which really means time, right? Make it faster, make it easier for people to get what they need when they need it. Pause, I'm seeing things flashing. Any questions already? Can everybody hear me okay? Zach, does it sound okay?
Yep, you're good, Mike. Keep going.
Okay. All right. So I'll tell you just sort of, my approach to a lot of these presentations, in case anyone starts wondering. I alternate slides between words and pictures, and you'll probably see me go quicker over the slides with words on them and spend more time on the pictures. Again, since you're getting the deck later, I don't need to read it to you. They just serve as kind of a marker to let us know what's coming next, but we can certainly stop and go back if anybody sees something that catches their attention. This particular slide, again, it's got a lot of vendors on it. That's not violating our plan here. What we're trying to show is what people want, right? The business users, the people in the agency, they have information spread out all over the place. There are a number of different ECM solutions probably in place, different storage solutions, as well as applications that kind of integrate aspects of ECM or content. So what they really want, and this is the vision of the ideal case, right, is that on any device, could be mobile, could be a laptop, people can see what they need wherever it happens to be. The state of the art in ECM is that you no longer have to migrate every time you add or change. So if you're currently an OpenText user or a FileNet user or an mFiles user, switching from one to the other, or if one department decides that they'd rather be on a particular platform, it doesn't require you to move everything. You can keep a central catalog, keep a central, guide, and search and find what you need. So that's the goal that we see people moving towards. And we're going to talk today about how we kind of enable that, both conceptually, with the planning and the process, as well as with the specific technology. All right, so intelligent ECM, I've already talked about it a couple of times. Let's make sure we're clear on ECM itself, right? Enterprise content management is not new technology at all. But I think when you look at the different functions, the different business areas where it's taken root, it tends to be these first three that you see here: documents, records, and contracts. Right? People think of them as this is records management, or this is a specific kind of control document. What we're seeing now, and where we're encouraging people to explore, is how to connect these, how to use other business functions, bring them into the fold, and connect one to the other based on how a document is really used. So it's not as simple as here's where I keep my contracts, but I'm doing business over in a CRM system, or here's where I keep my records, but I've got a case management system or a project management system where I'm having to go back and update things. All right, so as ECM has moved forward, one of the biggest trends we're going to talk about here is cloud, right? A lot of ECM solutions, historically, most solutions were on premises, and you had data center or server, dedicated to them. And that does slow implementation. It does slow integration. So there is a lot of move towards cloud. It's how people are working now. People are looking at cloud-based storage for all the collaboration they're doing, right? And in some ways, this is making the world messier, right? Because there's this thought that my ECM, my records management, my back office stuff, okay, that's for the archives, right? Those are my records. But the stuff that I'm working on every day, the spreadsheets, the PowerPoints, the documents, the images, all of those things, those are on OneDrive or SharePoint, and everybody can act. But then you start to get this proliferation of copies and versions and comments, and being able to keep track of which one is the official version or the latest version becomes a problem. But at the same time, if you push everybody to do all this work in the ECM, it's not always convenient. It's not always conducive to that. Depending on how well the ECM integrates Microsoft Office tools or open Office tools, you might be limited there. There's also a lot of security questions and questions about provenance and making sure that this particular document has been, untouched if it needs to be. Taking a second. Okay, so what we're trying to move from here, again, is to bring these two together, okay? So one more bit, sorry, on the legacy storage, right? As people are proliferating through these different file structures, I'm gonna show you an example from one of the utilities clients where I have worked. Depending on which part of the organization you asked how things were organized, something as important as a critical job review, right? So this is a form that gets filled out to determine whether or not a particular work order, a particular project meets certain thresholds where they have to increase either the training, certification, or the safety protocols around that activity, right? So if a critical job review is done, it should be done, but the results of that are important for planning and scheduling. But where to find it? If you're in one part of the organization, you might think that, okay, I go by customer, by project, and I eventually see the critical job review. Another group might go by organization or by function, what this actually is. And so you can see none of these are wrong. There are lots of different ways to organize the same information. And to someone new to an organization or who works in a different one, it might seem very foreign, while someone who works there, it makes perfect sense. We're going to come back to this in a minute, so commit this slide to memory. Because again, we're not saying that this is bad or wrong, but this does pose problems when you start trying to be clear in when you're sharing information. All right, so intelligent, we're finally there. For us, intelligent ECM means that the metadata about the document takes a starring role, right? So you get more focus on the metadata as opposed to just, earlier ECMs, of course, you were logging it with metadata, with details about what the document is and the date and the retention schedule and that sort of thing. But as far as making that useful for the business, to make it an active, living document, if you will, there's more information that's helpful, right? To not just what it is and who created it, but what it's about, right? You can also use this metadata to drive security permissions, right? So depending on what the document is and who authored it, maybe it's restricted. We're going to talk about workflows in a bit too. The metadata can drive the workflow so that you know what happens in the life cycle. So let me give a quick example. Again, I'm sticking kind of with the utility model. When we talk about metadata, there's a few levels, really. So a document itself, right, the content of the document could be considered metadata at times, or it's just data, but it is important. So some ECMs, you'll have a full text scan. Skip that for now. We think of the first ones, the assigned metadata, right? So usually when a user, like I said, use the critical job record review, if they say this document is a critical job review, then the ECM will ask them specifically for the date, the technician, the sub-project. It might be that this stuff can be defaulted, right? We know what the system date is. If you've logged in, we know who you are. And ideally, if you're connected to a scheduling or project management system, we know where you're supposed to be. But so these are areas where they might be entered or they might just be accepted, right? And the less data entry, we'll repeat this a couple of times, the less data entry, the better. So the more metadata that you can predict or provide, the less errors fewer errors you're going to have. The second set are the inherited. So once I tell you, yes, this is the sub-project I'm on, well, I can automatically infer this is the project, this is the customer, possibly the asset, right? What is this piece of equipment or this, where am I? And who's doing it? What's our group? Even further from that, things that might not be directly associated or added to the document metadata are the related things. So I might know, because of who this technician is, I know who the approver is. So I know once he finishes or she finishes, who's going to get it to do the approval. Likewise, we might know what district or customer, right? So metadata has, the obvious, the helpful, and the things that, actually come into play for automation or for analytics later. Slow down in case.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, we didn't have a question come through, but we did have a pretty cool comment from Isa, and I apologize if I mispronounced her name, but she said that they are coming across a lot of these issues right now during their website rewrite and moving files and AEMs to a more cloud-based system. I know you addressed some of that, but did you have any pointers maybe you can share with her? I guess during this time, whenever they're encountering these issues.
Yeah, so we will definitely focus a little bit on that, and Mirage is my backup on this. As far as moving things to the cloud and then the issues with migration, a lot of times the biggest challenge in the migration is deciding what to move, right? If it's how far back do we go, or people worry that they disconnect, right? So we move all of our current year stuff and we move it to the cloud so it's live and in color and readily accessible. And then they worry though, but sometimes we have to go back a year, 2 years, maybe a longer project or a longer requirement for audit. And that's where we by applying metadata, even in a catalog sense, right? So keeping a catalog of those other documents, we don't have to move them. We can identify them, we can describe them, and then they will still show up through search. So if someone's looking for all the documentation related to a project, the older stuff will show up. It'll just show up as being in a different location. And then it becomes, how they facilitate that connection. There are a couple of different ways. But please let me know if that was not the specific question you had, but I'll come and we will touch more on this in a little while. All right, so I think there was a little bit about document class. I kind of want to make sure we emphasize here, there's a little bit of terminology, especially if you're used to different ECMs. So for me, when I talk about a document class, that is where the rubber meets the road, right? So it's tell me what this document really is. It's a statement of work, it's a daily work record, it's a spec, right? In some ECM solutions, they call that document type, and document class is a level higher. So what I'm showing here is a class group, commercial agreements instead of each specific type of contract. I stay away from and recommend staying away from document type as a descriptor because it confuses some people if whether we're talking about PDFs or Word or some other text file or JSON file. So we tend to use, if you hear me talking about a document class, talking about this level, right? And we use class group or properties for the higher and lower. So a class group might be commercial agreements, and a property might be customer or vendor or something like that that gets related. So just wanted to make sure we're covered there. All right. Maybe I want to make sure that people understand one thing today. Hopefully more than one thing, but sometimes if all you get is one, I feel like it's a good. But intelligent ECM means that we use the metadata, not a file structure, to organize the content. And we alluded to this a minute ago with migrating to the cloud, where you might separate where things are. You might now have things in multiple locations. What we're saying here, and if you think back to the example we had a few minutes ago with the file structure, is we could generate any of those virtually by using the metadata. And it's much the same way that you might think about navigating an e-commerce site. If you are buying a new pair of shoes, to exercise, you're going to go to Zappos or Academy.com, and you're going to tell it maybe what sport, maybe what size, maybe what color or brand, and it filters down the list. I don't have to know anything else other than what I'm looking for. Another analogy that we use is the iTunes on your phone, perhaps. If you have music on your phone and you're looking for that particular song to get your run off, started off right, you just need to know the name of the song or which playlist it is or who the artist is. You don't necessarily need to know where it is. In fact, you won't know where it is on your phone. And it wasn't a coincidence that we used that mobile phone image to start off. That's kind of how we want people to be able to access their information. But it only works if the metadata is complete, right, to facilitate that. So you can still, like I say, you can create these virtual paths. You can still have the security. You can still have, the reliability of knowing what you're finding, but you don't have to know where it is. All right. And this is, I don't expect anybody to dive in and go to the fine print here, but this is us, as they say in the industry, eating our own dog food. We have an ECM that we use to manage our project documents as we are working on client sites. And, we've got the document up there, but here's how the metadata is available for each document. And you can see that the primary two ways that we organize documents is that they're by class, like I said, and then what the project is. From project, you can branch out very quickly into who worked on the project through the assignments, who the client was, even what industry they're in. Then we have the technology that's involved, possibly the vendor, software partner, or maybe another group that we are partnering with. So any of these things, content in our own ECM, if I want to know all of the government agency projects that we did in a particular time period, and I want to see, what were the statements of work, right? If I'm writing a document contract, or if I want to see the kickoff deck get some slide content, I can just do it as quickly as that. Likewise, if I need to find out I remember that Mirage did this great diagram on this one project. I can look up by him, right? And then I can find the architecture diagram. So I do want to let people know, like, this isn't, this is something we are doing. It's working for us, and we have it, and it's been working for some of our clients. All right, so process integration was the big part of this, right? And so let's start at a conceptual level and kind of talk about how, what we mean by sourcing the metadata, because if you want your users to be selecting rather than keying, you need to start thinking about where the valid sources of that information are. If you have master data, and I've got some examples here, these are not the way to do it. It's not the only way we have done it. But if you have master data, or if you're connecting to a particular asset management system or anything like that, then you can start to populate those metadata values. So project ID, project name, vendor name, employee information to an extent. All these things, you can bring them from the source systems where the information is created and maintained, and you make it available as an option for metadata in the ECM. When we talk about architecture later, very definitely this means you have to plan for storage, right? The more metadata you're going to bring, the more the ECM is going to rely on its database to keep track of those properties and their relationships. The more connections you have, again, the longer it might take to refresh, or the more complex your implementation might be. So we often recommend starting small, pick one business function or one group, one location, and work from there. We're going to get into a little more detail, just make sure. Okay, so when I talk about the process, right, this is something I talk about with people all the time, is integrate the process, not the applications, right? So, and this is what I mean. I love flowcharts. When you think about the life cycle of a particular project, beginning to end, any number of sub-processes and systems might come into play, right? So in this box, blue ones are sub-process, green ones are systems. And you can see the white boxes here, the white blue outlines, those are documents, right? So as we are going from, sales to operation, there's some correspondence, and then there's an order specification. When we get to where someone's actually doing real work, right, we've got a build sheet with specifications, or, what's customized. When we get to inventory and implementation or delivery, there are documents related to these, separate potentially from what's in the system or what's been maybe communicated person to person. And these documents become breadcrumbs, right? They're a way so that if I'm in operations or if I'm in logistics and I need to confirm what the original details of the sale were, I should be able to just look at the document. I shouldn't have to have access to the sales system. I shouldn't have to learn how to use the sales system, right? If it's just a document, if it's just a purchase order or build sheet, I should just be able to go get that. And we should all be using the same one, right? And so now I don't have to create an integration or a custom connection between Salesforce and my ERP, or between, my, project management system and my inventory system. If they're separate, if they're legacy systems that, people are happy to use, then they can live on premises. They can be in a data center, and we can still keep the documents that are using that metadata to relate them in the cloud, in the ECM repository. Just pausing for a second. All right, so I'm going to breathe and take a drink of water, and Mirage can talk for a minute. But Mirage, just let me know when you need me to go to the next slide.
All right, thanks, Mike. That was great. So, I want to cover a lot of the technical details about what it takes to, implement something like an intelligent ECM system that will give you the best benefit of your investment into projects as such. So the first thing to know, here's a simple physical or architecture diagram based on a few of the projects that I've been involved with Mike. And, the biggest thing to note here is, intelligent ECM systems are focused on casting a wide net to get users on board. So what that means is you want to have access through a system through the web or a mobile device, as Mike was showing, and even desktop or your laptop. And if you look at the diagram, there's obviously multiple components that go into this, and then you add the discussion of cloud versus on-prem. Things can get more detailed and require a lot more effort, a lot more resources, but it will totally make it worth it once the system comes into fruition. So if you see on the diagram real quick, we have web servers in play, application servers. You might have a search server that is specifically there to, increase performance for any kind of intelligent searching through the metadata that Mike was mentioning, the levels that the inheritance assignment, and, also you have key things to note are the document storage, you have network folders, and of course, master data and the external application. So this diagram just tells you all the different pieces that are in play. You have to have the master data in order to build good metadata structure for any kind of document to come in and properly go through its workflow, its life cycle, and also just to be properly and easily searched. Without that, it's going to make things more complicated than you would need. And some of the key features I just want to highlight on a typical ECM software or solution. As I mentioned, web, mobile, and desktop access, those are huge, especially given the certain use cases that I'll cover and case studies that I'll cover in the next slides. Again, powerful metadata aware search that can only happen if your master data is set up correctly. And again, another feature, offline mode is huge, given in certain circumstances, such as a technician being in the field. They might be in an area where they might not have, access to internet or data. So offline capability is also huge in order to kind of just keep the process going without having to worry about, loss of documentation or data. And that's huge. That's something that our clients have personally found invaluable. Other parts, again, as Mike has highlighted, this is the flexible integration points. And, with intelligent ECM systems, they provide connectors and they provide ways for the system and for you to be able to connect to third-party applications like Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, and be able to bring that content in, even if it's historical, even if it's based on years of document storage on a system. Those can be brought in with certain tools and connectors that allow you to bring those in without investing in a full-on, migration that could take a few months to a year, and in some cases even longer on bigger projects that include a lot more historical data in the older systems. And the other thing that's an advantage in a intelligent ECM system is a watched network folder. This could just be a shared drive where you drop a new document in there, and the system will be intelligent enough to notice or recognize, here's a new document that just came into this folder. Let's ingest that automatically into the system, and also capture the metadata of that specific file. Whether, as Mike mentioned, there's OCR and scanning involved as well. It can even look into a document, pick out certain metadata and apply it for that document. And in that case, a user doesn't even have to really add any metadata. It's automatically there, available to search, view, and gain any kind of information that's really needed for your day-to-day operations. And I've already covered the intelligent connectors, and those from what I've seen in my experience, have increased over the years, and there's a huge diversity regardless of industry or the type of technology for those connectors to work with an intelligent ECM system. So the next slide, I want to go over the high-level approach of what we think about an implementation for, an ECM system. And if you'll notice, based on a typical, approach and project that we've done, we've noticed that it could take, around 4 months to implement a specific vertical or specific few functions for an organization. And they all start with the discovery phase, right? That's identifying the current state, capturing requirements, creating an initial roadmap, and building a project plan of who needs to do what and within what schedule or time frame. That's usually typical for a lot of projects, and so that should be very familiar. The next step is getting into the design, creating the data model. For example, Mike showed one that we've implemented based on at Smartbridge personally. And beyond that, what are the different documentation plans for deployment and training and all that stuff, and what's the management approach, the estimates, key things that are needed to ensure that when you get into development, QA, and deployment, there's a plan for that. People have been assigned, what's coming up ahead, and it just makes things, because there are so many moving pieces, as I mentioned in the physical architecture slide, there's a lot of components there, and so having that clear plan will definitely, make things much easier when you get into development and the other phases. Again, development, this is key, is the infrastructure setup. I went over that on the architecture diagram, right? And that can vary based on the current feasibility, the current infrastructure, the current technical capabilities that you have within your organization or agency. This is something I didn't mention before, but again, there's on-premises and cloud as well, and that can also apply to not just the systems that you can connect to, but also the infrastructure setup that you have. And so we can have, I mentioned there's some storage accounts and storage SQL databases that come into play. That can be done connected to at Microsoft Azure, for example. And you can have your web server and application server also based on Azure VM. So there's a lot of flexibility, scalability that can come into play in terms of the infrastructure setup. So having those technical resources is crucial in making sure that your development of what you're trying to accomplish can be done successfully. Of course, there's installation, there's configuration of the software, and then you get into, you've designed in the previous phase what the system should look like, what the metadata structure should look like in terms of a data model or just, documentation. This is where you're going to come in and actually build out the structure, build out exactly how you want certain metadata related, for example, project to subproject, to an employee, or whatever the multiple use cases that you might have, or the master data you have in play. Another thing is implementing the workflows and the views. Views are basically what we call just easy ways for users to have predefined search capabilities based on what they most often look for day to day. And of course, the workflows are the key essential parts of automating any system and any functionality. From automating what metadata is involved or associated to a document, to who is involved in terms of reviewing a document, assigning a document, providing feedback, and a really good intelligent ECM system should be able to handle these various functions, industries, streamlines, and verticals that I will cover in a bit. And one of the biggest things that we get asked is, about the security about these documents, because there are so many pieces, not just in terms of technology, but also different roles, different users, different descriptions of people who come in and interact with these systems. You have to develop a security model and implement it that can be versatile and, you know, it's easy to maintain for an administrator, but also easy for users. You know, you don't really have to touch anything from a user perspective, but from an admin perspective, with a well thought out security model, you can really, it can really take you a long way in terms of maintaining, you know, integrity of data. But the biggest thing of all is maintaining compliance, whether it's SOX compliance or, you know, HIPAA regulations. That security model really comes into play in terms of who has what permission. And that itself is a very important discussion in the design phase and coming up with that. And that's working with users. And then in the development phase, making it a reality. And again, one of the biggest things is connecting the metadata sources, whether you're getting, you know, CRM data from your Salesforce, Salesforce application that's existing, or, you know, any other system that you have, such as ADP for payroll information. And again, the biggest thing is the content migration. In the development phase, content migration has been huge for bringing in historical data. You know, again, I've mentioned where there's tools in place to make this happen, but this saves, you know, organizations, and it can save your agency a whole bunch of time by, you know, assigning metadata and using tools to automatically import and bring into your ECM system thousands and 10,000s of documents, you know, within a few hours. And so that's the development phase. And of course, that's going to be the longest phase that we've seen within our implementations. And then you come into QA. This is just
Mirage. Can I get you, I know we get asked this a lot, can you expand a little bit on the security aspects and how the metadata, how the security on a particular document can change through its life cycle, and how the metadata is involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good question. In terms of implementing a security model that's flexible, right? You can leverage workflows as well for particular documents. So based on the metadata, for example, and I'll cover this in the use case a little more in detail, you know, based on where that document is in a workflow. And yeah, in a workflow, a document will have metadata, for example, having an approver on there, and that approver has a specific role. When that document moves forward in the workflow, the metadata can change, and based on the new metadata, that security model basically can change its permissions automatically, saying, okay, this approver has changed, and based on the relation to this new approver, for example, I know that this person's role is, you know, operations manager or QMS, you know, director or QMS implementer. And based on that, the system can automatically, just from the metadata changing through a workflow, for example, it can intelligently know, okay, I know this person or this approver has this role, and based on the security that's implemented, this role has these permissions. So the moment it comes into that new state or that new approver method within the workflow, then, you know, that security will be flexible enough to change with that metadata. Okay, so going into QA, you know, that's just end-to-end testing, UAT testing, getting sign-off, and doing load testing to make sure the performance is well. And then going into deployment, right? This is a huge aspect of making sure you can deploy the system to users in a way that's non-intrusive to their day-to-day operations, and also just providing the right support, whether it's a pilot or just a go live deployment. And of course, there's production support that follows for any kind of assistance or any issues that are happening. So again, just to kind of cover the high level, you're looking at about 4 months, but of course it's going to change based on a lot of variables that I've mentioned.
Hey, Mirage, we did have a question come through if we had time to address it.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
So the question we got was, will the system or will a system automatically cross-reference this approver role and the permissions for it? So if it's still a manual process, then that'll need to be part of the discovery process prior to phase 2. Yeah, so will the system automatically cross-reference the approver role permissions?
It can. It's something that you have to develop into the system. And one of the use cases, I will actually go very in depth on how we've leveraged that at a previous client. So, you know, there's ways to take it. If it is a manual process, then it can still automatically cross-reference. But the best thing is you can also automate it. And I will definitely cover that in the upcoming slide.
Great. Thank you, Mirage.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So time check, we've got about 15 minutes max. So I think we're in good shape. Just want to let you know.
Yeah. All right, we'll go to the next slide. And, you know, again, examples of use cases. So, you know, before COVID, there was already a opportunity and a willingness or a need, I would say, for collaboration. Now, during COVID, actually, the need for collaboration has increased so much more. And an intelligent ECM system that's implemented in the correct way can help well beyond just the typical collaboration that we think of, which is like, you know, communication or, you know, whether it's a video call. This takes it to a whole nother level where, you know, by implementing certain workflows, the document, you know, coming to or leveraging notifications and within the workflow and that document coming towards different various roles, you can leave comments, you can leave, you know, you can get email notifications saying this has been approved or this needs a review, and you can have a seamless collaboration on specific documents, on specific verticals or use cases. And, you know, some of the common use cases we usually have, you know, they can be different verticals like quality, sales, manufacturing, project management, legal, and HR. But within these verticals, there's so many different, you know, functions that come into play. For example, quality, SOP management, training management. Project management is something that we're very, very familiar with. And, you know, that, of course, that includes collaboration, but project planning and the different phases that are involved in a project management type of use case. You know, you have contracts for legal, HR might have onboarding workflows and recruiting workflows where it automates, you know, a lot of the documentation, signatures, and, you know, even leading new employees to training content within the system. So there's so many use cases. It's so diverse, and, you know, the best ECM systems that are intelligent will be able to allow you to cater to, regardless of vertical, of industry or function, a way to create, you know, exactly what you need and the way you need it to basically help, you know, your day-to-day operations and make your life more efficient in terms of finding the right information, in terms of, you know, completing your tasks or operations, whether that's approval, review, publishing documents, you know, having them assigned to someone else. There's a plethora of capabilities that you can have. And so for what I want to do is just cover 3 use cases as we round out this webinar. Just to give you some information on our case study and who the client was. You know, I'm not going to name names, but they're a leading engineering and construction maintenance provider. You know, they serve chemical, manufacturing, energy, and defense industries, you know, and their operations involve 5 different continents, and they have well over 5,000 employees and $1 billion in annual revenue. And, you know, when they came to us, they were very decentralized matrix organization, you know, and that basically resulted because of a lot of acquisitions of other companies. So the simple request is, implement an ECM as a solution platform. And the result that we ultimately saw based on, our work was that multiple business processes were added to the program following pilot successes. And I just want to highlight one thing real quick. That our client here is very specific in engineering and the industry. The same thing can be applied to, whether it's education, a learning management system, a QMS system. Again, I just want to highlight that there's a lot of flexibility with an intelligent ECM system that can really make things much easier. The key challenges that we really faced at the client in this case study is the limited standardization and processing regarding information capture and management. And what this ultimately provided a challenge in terms of the different types of data that was being stored, the different ways of how documents were being captured, whether they were being scanned or picture was being taken and then scanned, or just through email. And so that just provided a lot of complexity in terms of standardizing something. And the program initiatives that I want to highlight, the three biggest ones were, document control. This was a quality management system implementation, basically. And it basically was to allow, key important procedures, safety manuals that are really important for the safety of employees to be accessible and available, as I mentioned earlier, but through a mobile device or offline, or where they can basically access that information on the go. And these are only documents that are, published and approved by the quality or document control department. The other initiative that came into play was the project scope management. And this was basically just capturing changes requested by, customers while on site. So a technician would be out in the field and, they'd be working with the customer, and there was a change request or on the service that they were providing. And so technicians were immediately be able to access the system on their phone or their iPad or the tablet and update some information on their specific project, add a specific document that might be like a change request. And for the back office, or for, just anyone involved, supervisors, to be able to see these changes immediately. And if they're offline, the moment they come online, those changes would get synced. And in that way, the collaboration aspect also improves. And the final one was centralized billing. And this was just to reduce time between the service delivery and invoicing. And in addition to that, a lot of key issues in terms of having the wrong information, revenue leakages, or delays in invoices. So let's talk about the document control and quality and safety project or aspect of this case study. The challenge was that because the company is so widespread across different districts, across different continents, there's a risk of them accessing procedures that are out of date or simply incorrect. There may be a new regulation that comes into play, or they're just a out of date version of a document. This could really reduce incidents that could result in injury, job delays, or rework. And what we found was, the smallest things like a specific PSI measurement for a job on a pipeline could result in serious injury if, that a value or measurement was off or old based off a previous study or, information that came out from that. We wanted to make sure that technicians and the employees that are working in the field got the approved, published, and latest procedures and safety documents. And, also the system being able to provide audit logs allowed for, key data to be presented during investigations if there was a safety incident or a quality non-conformance case that comes up. The next one that I mentioned was the change orders and revenue opportunities. The challenge here was that the communication of scope changes and additional work requirements were missed, right? By implementing a system that automatically allowed for that collaboration for a technician to make that change in the field or add additional work requirements was automated in a way that addressed the revenue leakage in real time, because I, for example, as a technician, would make my change on that project or on that specific document or that work for a particular client, and the supervisor, say Mike, he immediately gets a notification on his phone or email saying there's been new requirements that have been added to this project. So please review, and that way Mike can call me, or we can in real time kind of collaborate and to make sure that, you know, there's no additional work that's being missed or that's being completed without, you know, being invoiced. And I'll cover that in a bit after this. Again, so in this process, managers can review, approve, and provide feedback with the technician on site. Change orders can be created. That's just one example. And the biggest thing that we found was empowering for these technicians in the field, and even in the back office, is they could provide electronic signature on these documents without having to print, scan, or be on the field and worry about finding a way to be able to do that, you know? And we also were able to create new job records in the ERP systems that they had based on those integrations that I had spoken about earlier.
Hey, Mirage, we did have something come through.
Okay.
Quick question, and really it's just a clarification. So the result of the content migration and the intelligent connectors, is that a copy of the data that exists in the ECM vendor's environment?
No, so this is, well, I'll let Mike answer that real quick. I think he has a better answer for you on that.
So yeah, we would advise against copies, right? So if the choices are to either move the content into the sort of the ECM's proprietary or private space where it's managed within the ECM solution, fully managed, or leave it where it is and only migrate the metadata. So basically creating a cat directory within the ECM so that you can still see both sets in the same search results, but you're not creating copies that can then be, get out of sync, right? So if you're still leaving the content in, say, OneDrive, and you're merely cataloging it, what usually gets done is you'll set up a crawler or an agent from time to time that'll go back and check that files haven't been deleted or moved. If they've been edited, it can update that metadata. But generally, you have to sort of be proactive about that, or you have to set up an active process that says go and check, go and confirm. Otherwise, your search results could be out of date. But that's a way to avoid moving everything into the ECM. If you're worried about storage space, or if you're worried about time, or if this is a document that, for whatever reason, you don't think is going to get accessed very much, but you don't want to lose track of it completely.
Okay, and just to wrap up our webinar real quick, I'm going to go through the final use case, or case study, which was that centralized billing process, which improved cash flow. Again, I mentioned there are a lot of times where, an invoice was slowly or inaccurately brought into the system, and that could have just been through processing paperwork or missing information on the paper or on those important documents like timesheets. And so the system allowed service delivery documents like timesheets to be uploaded in the field, and it allowed dedicated billing administrators to generate invoices and leverage workflows to route electronic approvals automatically. So if you go to the next slide, I believe we are ready for the questions.
Yeah.
I know we only have a minute left. If you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them here, or get back to you on those through email.
It does not at this time. So we did not have any questions come through. But yes, we had one pop up. Will the recording also be available? I believe that it will. The recording and I want to say the deck of this will also be available too. Other than
Right.
that,
And
yeah,
let me chime in at this point. This is Joy again from DIR. Thank you all for joining us, attendees and panelists. Smartbridge, we really appreciate you sharing your expertise. So attendees, you will get a follow-up email that will come from Smartbridge staff. It will include contact information for them if you have more questions, anything they promised, which I believe was primarily the slides, the DIR DIR CPE form, and then there will be a recording available, but that normally takes a few days to put that together. So I'm not sure if you'll get one email or two, depends on if they want to wait and send the link to the recording later. As you leave right now, you will see an evaluation, and we would appreciate you filling that out. Meanwhile, I think we're done. Thank you all. I really, really appreciate it. Mike, Lauren, Mirage, Zach, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you for having us.
thank you all. Yep.
Well, everybody have a great day. Take care.